The wind howled like a living thing, rattling against the fuselage of the rescue helicopter as Jack Reynolds tightened his grip on the controls. Outside, the world was a swirling blur of white, a blizzard rolling in fast over the remote, snow-covered mountains. The sun had already begun to dip below the jagged peaks, casting long shadows across the frozen landscape. Jack had been flying search and rescue missions for over a decade. He knew these mountains better than most, had saved more lives than he could count, and had seen how unforgiving nature could be. In this kind of storm, anyone trapped out there wouldn't survive long. His radio crackled with static. "Jack, we need you back. The storm's intensifying. Visibility's dropping below safe levels." It was his team at base camp, urging him to return. Jack exhaled sharply, about to acknowledge their call when something flashed on his thermal scanner. A single, small heat signature appeared on the screen, a faint red dot against the cold void of the snow-covered terrain below. His brow furrowed. "What the hell," he muttered, adjusting the scanner. At first, he thought it might be a lone animal, a fox, maybe a stray dog. But something felt off. The location was miles away from any known trails, any cabins, any signs of human life. There was no reason for an animal to be out there, not in the middle of a worsening storm. His gut twisted, a feeling he had learned never to ignore. His co-pilot's voice came through the headset, laced with concern. "We need to call it, Jack. The wind's picking up, and if we push our luck, we're gonna have trouble getting back." Jack hesitated, eyes locked on the scanner. His hands hovered over the controls, the logical part of his brain telling him to turn back, but his instincts screamed otherwise. He'd been on too many missions where a second of doubt meant the difference between life and death. What if someone was out there? What if they were injured? Trapped? Freezing? His fingers tightened around the controls. "I'm gonna check it out." A sigh from the other end of the radio. "Jack. Just one pass over the area," he cut in. "If it's nothing, we're out of here." Before his team could argue, he banked the helicopter sharply to the right, heading toward the mysterious heat signature, a lone flicker of warmth in an ocean of ice. Whatever was down there, Jack was about to find out. 2. As Jack Reynolds eases his rescue helicopter onto the snow-covered ground, the deafening roar of the rotor blades battles against the howling wind. The blizzard rages around him, reducing visibility to mere feet, but his instincts push him forward. Wrapped in his insulated flight jacket, he steps out into the knee-deep snow, his boots sinking with every step. The cold bites at his face, and each breath turns to mist as he scans the desolate landscape. The thermal scanner led him here, but now, standing in the bitter storm, doubt gnaws at him. Did he misread the signal? Was it just an animal? He's about to turn back when something catches his eye, a flash of red against the endless white. A blood-stained cloth, half buried in the ice. His pulse quickens. He kneels, brushing away the snow with gloved fingers. The fabric is stiff with frozen blood, its edges tattered. His breath hitches. Was someone injured here? Before he can process the thought, a sound pierces through the wind. A faint whimper. Jack's head snaps up. It's coming from ahead. He pushes forward, the sound growing louder, more desperate. Then, just a few feet ahead, he sees them. 2 tiny puppies. Shivering, barely alive, their small bodies huddled together in the snow. Their fur is stiff with frost, their breaths shallow. Jack kneels, carefully reaching out. One lets out a weak, pitiful cry, while the other barely stirs. They've been out here for too long. But as he gently lifts them into his arms, a different kind of chill creeps up his spine. Not from the cold, but from the tracks in the snow. A set of paw prints, scattered around the puppies as if they had wandered for a while. But next to them, something more disturbing, human footprints. Leading away. Disappearing into the storm. Someone left them here. But why? And where did they go? 3. Jack tightens his grip around the two shivering puppies, their fragile bodies barely reacting to his warmth. His gloved hands tremble, not from the cold, but from the weight of the moment. The snowstorm is worsening, thick flakes slashing through the air like tiny blades. His rescue helicopter hums in the background, its blade struggling against the howling wind. Time is running out. Just as he turns to rush back to the chopper, a static-filled crackle bursts through his radio. "Help, please." Jack stops dead in his tracks. The voice is weak, barely more than a whisper, yet the desperation in it is unmistakable. His pulse quickens as he fumbles with the radio. "This is Jack Reynolds, search and rescue. Can you hear me? What's your location?" Silence. He checks his scanner, adjusting the frequency. A faint blip appears, just beyond the ridge, in the same direction as the footprints leading away from the blood-stained cloth. His breath catches. Someone is out there. And they might not have much time left. His eyes dart between the helicopter and the path ahead. His instincts scream at him to act fast. The pilot's voice crackles through his headset, warning him. "Jack, the storm's closing in. We've got to leave soon." A brutal choice grips his mind: get the half-frozen puppies to safety or venture deeper into the storm, risking everything for a voice that may already be too late. Jack clenches his jaw. He knows what he has to do. Adjusting his gear, he tucks the puppies securely into his thermal jacket, shielding them from the cold. Then, with a deep breath, he grips his flashlight, tightens his scarf, and follows the tracks disappearing into the white abyss, toward the unknown, toward danger, toward the voice calling for help. 4. Jack pushes through the relentless blizzard, his body numbing with each step as the icy wind slashes against his face. His vision is reduced to almost nothing, just an endless expanse of white, the howling storm threatening to swallow him whole. But he keeps moving, following the rapidly fading footprints, knowing that time is slipping away. Then, through the thick snowfall, he spots something, a dark shape barely visible beneath the ice and snow. As he gets closer, his heart pounds. It's a car, nearly buried, its windows coated in frost. Bracing against the wind, he wipes away the frozen layer on the glass, peering inside. His breath catches in his throat. Inside, a woman lies slumped against the seat, unmoving. Her face is pale, her lips blue from the cold. Jack yanks the frozen door handle, but it won't budge. Desperation kicks in. He digs into his gear, grabs a survival knife, and smashes the glass. The freezing wind rushes into the car, but she doesn't stir. He reaches in, checking for a pulse, weak, but still there. Jack's eyes dart to the back seat, where a small, tattered blanket lies in a heap. A realization dawns on him: the puppies were hers. She must have tried to find help but collapsed before she could make it. Adrenaline surges through him. She doesn't have much time. Bracing himself, Jack pulls her from the car, lifting her onto his back. The weight, combined with the storm, makes every step agonizing, but he doesn't stop. Clutching the puppies against his chest, he fights his way through the snow, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He can almost see the faint lights of his helicopter through the storm. Just a little farther. Then, his radio crackles to life. "Jack! The storm's too strong. We have to pull out now." Jack stumbles, his stomach twisting in horror as he watches the helicopter's lights fade into the storm. The deafening roar of the blades disappears. He is alone. 5. With the storm raging outside, Jack has no choice but to seek shelter. His body aches from exhaustion, but he forces himself forward, carrying the unconscious woman on his back while keeping the freezing puppies wrapped inside his gear. The wind howls mercilessly, biting into his skin like 1,000 needles. His boots sink into the deep snow with every step, making the trek feel impossible. Then, through the blinding snowfall, he spots it, a half-destroyed cabin, barely standing against the brutal conditions. It's old, its wooden walls weathered and weak, but it's the only hope for survival. Jack stumbles toward the door and shoves it open with his shoulder. Inside, the air is thick with dust and the faint, lingering scent of decay. The roof is partially caved in, letting snow drift onto the splintered floorboards. A broken fireplace stands against one wall, and a few discarded wooden planks lie in the corner. No signal. No food. No way out. Jack lowers the woman onto the driest spot he can find, then checks her pulse again. It's faint, but steady. He shrugs off his jacket and covers her, then unzips his gear to check on the puppies. They're still alive, but barely. Their tiny bodies tremble, their breaths weak. He gathers a few wooden planks, stacking them into the fireplace. Digging into his survival kit, he pulls out a small emergency lighter. After a few tries, a flame flickers to life, casting a weak, flickering glow against the walls. He sets the puppies near the fire, rubbing their tiny paws to help restore circulation. Minutes pass. The wind howls outside, shaking the fragile walls. Then, a weak cough. Jack spins around. The woman's eyes flutter open, her face pale as death. She tries to sit up, but her body is too weak. He kneels beside her, offering his canteen. She sips it slowly, her lips trembling. Then, she whispers something that makes Jack's blood run cold. Someone left us here, on purpose. Jack leans in closer, his heart pounding. What do you mean? Who left you here? Her eyelids droop, and for a moment, he thinks she might pass out again. But then, she forces herself to speak, her voice no more than a breath. He'll come back, for them. Jack glances at the puppies near the fire. His stomach tightens. Them? The puppies? The woman barely nods before her strength gives out, and she collapses again. Jack stares at her, then at the door, then back at the tiny creatures shivering by the fire. Something is wrong. And that night, he finds out just how wrong. This moment is where the suspense reaches its peak. Jack, exhausted and trapped in the isolated, half-destroyed cabin, is jolted awake by the puppies' low growls. Their tiny bodies tremble, but their instincts tell them something is wrong. The storm outside rages on, but through the deafening wind, Jack hears it, footsteps crunching in the snow. Slow. Deliberate. Stalking. His breath catches in his throat. He reaches for his survival knife, gripping it tightly. His eyes dart toward the unconscious woman lying on the makeshift bed near the dying fire. If someone is out there, they are not alone. Then it happens. The door bursts open with a violent crash, sending a flurry of snow into the cabin. The fire flickers wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A tall, shadowy figure stands in the doorway, face partially obscured by the storm. But his eyes, cold, calculating, lock onto the puppies. Jack tenses, positioning himself between the intruder and the woman. The man takes a slow step forward, unfazed by Jack's presence. You shouldn't have taken them, the man says, his voice calm but filled with menace. Jack's grip on the knife tightens. The realization crashes over him like the storm outside. This wasn't just a case of abandonment. Someone wanted these puppies left here. Someone wanted them to die. And now, that same person had come back. But for what? Jack doesn't have time to think. He prepares for a fight, knowing that in this remote wilderness, there's no backup, no escape. Only survival. The tension inside the small, frozen cabin is suffocating. Jack grips his survival knife, his body tense, eyes locked onto the intruder standing in the doorway. Snow swirls around the man, his breath visible in the cold air, but his focus is razor sharp. He's here for the puppies. You shouldn't have taken them, the man says, his voice low and threatening. Jack doesn't move. The woman, barely able to sit up, clutches the puppies close. Their small bodies tremble in her arms. Sen. The standoff feels like it lasts an eternity. Then, in the corner of Jack's eye, he sees the woman fumbling for something in his gear. A sudden realization hits him, the flare gun. She grips it weakly, raising it toward the cabin's battered roof. Then, with the last of her strength, she fires. A loud bang. A streak of red light pierces the storm outside. The man flinches, his momentary distraction giving Jack the chance he needs. In a flash, Jack lunges, slamming the door shut and barricading it. Footsteps retreat into the storm. The man knows the rescue team will come now. His chance is gone. By dawn, the rescue chopper arrives, the red flare leading them to safety. The man is gone, but he leaves behind a mystery, a chilling truth that won't be answered until later. The truth unfolds hours later, inside a warm hospital room. The woman finally tells Jack the full story. She had been on the run. The puppies weren't just abandoned, they were never meant to be found. Someone had deliberately left them to die, to erase evidence of something much bigger. A criminal operation. A betrayal. And somehow, these tiny, helpless creatures were at the center of it all. Jack listens, his mind racing. But as he looks down at the puppies, now safe and warm, a quiet realization settles over him. He saved them. And in a way, they saved him too. In the end, there's only one decision to make. Jack keeps the puppies. A reminder that sometimes, trusting your gut doesn't just lead to a rescue, it leads to the truth.